be educated, but I'm so frustrated. Hello to my loneliness. I guess that ignorance is bliss. Take me back to before I knew. Rewind, take it out of cue. Innocence can be a young man's game. Signed up for the hall of shame. I wish I knew.
Advantage. I wasn't trying to think of it in a wrong term as far as how to take advantage of people that are in adversity. That isn't that at all. I mean, remember yesterday I shared with you that in a leader's perspective, it's always the people first. What's always best for the people. That keeps a leader's motives pure and right. If you and I are constantly saying, well, what's best for my people? Because whatever is best for my people as a leader, I should be doing my very best to provide it for them. But this is a terrific lesson on the fact that in adversity, if we have the right perspective, and this is a lesson on perspective, trust me. In fact, today and tomorrow, this is a part 1, tomorrow's part 2. This is a perspective lesson. What I want you to catch, though, is that without any question, the adversity that you and I are going through right now does have distinct advantages for us. That I know. You say, John, how do you know that? Well, it's very simple. Every crisis and every adversity in the history of the world has turned into terrific advantage for society. Again, I remember I mentioned yesterday, every medicine you take was because there was an adversity, a problem. Somebody had something that needed to be cured, so somebody went and invented a medicine. In other words, good things come out of bad things if you have the right perspective. If you have the wrong perspective, that's not true. So this lesson is on how do I take the adversity and gain some advantage out of it for myself, for my family, for my community, for others. And when I go to perspective, here's the quote: how we view things is how we do things. So it's possible for two people to view adversity and have two different responses to that adversity. One takes adversity and turns it into an advantage, and the other one takes adversity and says, oh, I'm at a disadvantage, and I'm a victim, and they just basically lay down, and instead of getting better, they get worse. Same adversity, same situation, two total different responses. Now, the responses are based upon a person's perspective. Let me give you an example. Albert Einstein, there was a brilliant fellow. Albert Einstein said this: in the middle of difficulty lies opportunity. Now, I've loved that statement for quite some time, and I share it with you because I think there's something very interesting in what Albert Einstein said. He said it was in the middle. In the middle. In fact, when I put that quote in here, I capitalized all the letters on middle. In the middle of difficulty lies opportunity. You know what Einstein was saying? He's saying you have got to get into the crisis. You have got to get into the middle of the problem before you see how to get opportunity out of it. Because at the beginning, we don't understand how deep the problem's going to be. It doesn't affect us enough to take away our options so that all of a sudden we get desperate for an answer. It's not at the end. If by the end we haven't seen opportunity, to be honest with you, we just passed it. The door was back in the middle. But in the middle of difficulty, adversity, crisis, that's where Albert Einstein said, that's where we find opportunity. It's that type of thinking, perspective for you and me that I want to talk about because trust me on this, if we have the right perspective, we're going to find that to be very true. Now, let me give you an example. Now, this is a business example. Some of you are in the business world, some of you are not. So let me just give you this one because I read it just the other day, and it fits the business community. So if you've got a team, if you've got an organization, you got a big company, small company, whatever. This comes out of Forbes, and when I was going through and reading this, the thing that really grabbed my attention was the headlines. It said the coronavirus crisis is creating problems, but it is also creating tremendous opportunities. This comes out of Forbes. And so then they gave an example, and the example they gave there I know pretty well, and they gave the example of the Ford Motor Company. And the Ford Motor Company, if you go back about 12 years, had had quite a few years consecutive of poor performance. They were in a recession, and they needed to finance. In fact, they were so desperate that Bill Ford, the father of the whole Ford clan, basically sat down and had to talk them into collateralizing and the blue Ford Oval. The thing that's most precious to Ford is that brand, that trademark. And they literally had to take that and use it for collateral to borrow money to get themselves financially in a position where they could maybe upright themselves. And then they also brought in Alan Malawi, brought in an outsider, a terrific leader. And if you know the story, it's an incredible story. It's a story of an amazing turnaround, maybe the most amazing corporate turnaround in this century. But what I want you to see is it was only in the adversity, the heavy crisis. I mean, what would make the Ford family say, okay, we're going to use this incredible trademark as collateral to borrow money? I mean, that's the last thing in the world they wanted to give up. But can I tell you something? A crisis will make you do things that you wouldn't do without the crisis. Let me just stop and talk to you for a moment. You and I both know in our heart that there are some changes we won't make unless we have to make them. Now, I speak for myself. In my life, there have been a few times I just didn't want to make the change until all the other options were stripped away from me, and one day I looked at myself and said, I've got to make the change. Well, it happened for the Ford Motor Company, and in this Forbes article, it then put three things on the advantages of a crisis. And I give this to you quickly because this is in the business field. I'm getting ready to come to you in the personal way, so stay right with me. Here's what Forbes said. First of all, a crisis changes the balance of risk and reward. And they so clearly wrote the fact that during normal circumstances and situations, we don't risk a lot. We enjoy where we are, and the tendency always is for us to stay put, not make a lot of changes. And the fear of failure overrules the risk issue. So we basically stay the same, but what happens is that in a crisis, all of a sudden it helps us realize that we have to change. All of a sudden, what was kind of optional, should we change, becomes a command. We have to change. Why? Because we're in deep weeds. And so basically Forbes was saying if you have a business, if you have a team, whatever, that there are perhaps some things in your life that you've just held pat that you should have let go a long time ago, and you're going to risk more during a crisis. And they said that was good. Number two, and I love this because it's so true, a crisis increases our focus. You see, every organization has what I would call competing priorities and conflicting priorities. Some priorities that just conflict with where you're really wanting to go, and then you have some that internally compete with what you're trying to accomplish. And so what happens is there's a lot of activity in an organization that isn't necessarily accomplishment. But what does a crisis do? We immediately begin to eliminate all of the things that are not totally essential in our business. In other words, we begin to cut. We begin to look and say, what do I have to have versus what was nice to have? And that's happening right now. I mean, it's happening everywhere over America. People are looking and they're reevaluating, and what they're doing is that this crisis is causing me. I mean, I could give you a lot of personal examples in my life that I'm just saying, okay, I now have to focus on not what is wonderful, what is nice, what I would like to be included in. I have to focus on one thing, what's essential. Everything else falls aside. There's a terrific benefit in business when you begin to get rid of conflicting or competing priorities. Major difference. And say, okay, we've just got to stay with the main thing. We got to make the main thing, like Covey says, the main thing. So, as Forbes was pointing out so good, it basically, a crisis gets us to take more risk. Crisis increases our focus. And number three, what it does is it identifies leaders. Because what do leaders do during a crisis? They stand up and they stand down. You see, you can't manage your way out of a crisis. You have to lead your way. If you could manage your way, there would be small incremental changes that you can control and feel comfortable with that you would begin to allow in your life that would get you out of the issue. And that isn't going to get you out of a crisis. All of a sudden, you've got to have somebody stand up and say, wait, I'm going to lead my way out. I'm going to get creative in my thinking. I'm going to get bold in my decision making. Wow. Now, here's what I want you to see. In business or in your personal life, Einstein was right. It's in the middle of the difficulty where the opportunity begins to show itself. I could give you all kinds of examples of what I can sense as a leader that's beginning to happen. Now, I don't have the back end. I don't have the whole story. I'm looking at a picture that's not complete. But let me just give you an example. What's happened in the education world? Well, what's happened in the education world is all the kids got home. Not only in elementary and high school, but universities, colleges, sent the kids home. We got to have our social distancing. And by the way, I think that was a very wise decision. I think right now, social distancing is probably the most important thing we can do to cut this out and probably, hopefully, get some answers and move on with our life. But now, so what are the kids doing? Online classes. Kids, millions of kids right now, are on online courses. Now, online courses, that's not new. That's been around for about 12, 15 years. And there has been a slow, steady increase of students taking online courses. But now they all have to do it. And here's what's going to happen. There are kids who have never taken an online course, and they're going to do that, and then they're going to look at themselves and say, wait a minute, I'm home. I can be in surroundings that are familiar to me. I don't have to go back to college if I don't want to. I can get a degree online. Now, I'm not advocating that. I'm just saying I can guarantee you, I promise you, that there are a bunch of students that are all of a sudden going to see that there's another way to get their education. I'm not even saying it's a better way, but I'm just saying crisis causes change. And I will tell you that steady increase in online kind of classes, after this, it's going to be like that. It's just going to increase. Why? Because a lot of kids who have never done it before tested it and said, oh, this kind of works for me. I think in the business community, when people are working from home, I think it's going to change the work environment. I really do. I'm not saying it's pro or con. It doesn't matter. What I'm wanting you to see is that crisis causes you and I to make changes that we would never make if we didn't have the crisis. The way I prefer it is to say crisis bumps us out of our comfort zone into our creative zone. That's a great statement. Crisis bumps us. In fact, if I don't get the bump, I won't get out of my comfort zone. It's the bump that gets me out of my comfort zone into the creative zone. Okay, now that's business. Okay, so for you that have organizations, teams, companies, whatever, hopefully that helps you.